Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers. Navigating the insidious illness of Alzheimer's is something nobody asks for. The disease sneaks up on you and your loved one, and it feels like you've been sucker punched in the gut. Then you ask, where do we turn for help? Who do we call? What do we do? These questions and more are what we hope to answer and give you some direction and hope. Now let's join our host, Jeff Edwards.
Greetings and welcome. ¿Qué pasa? What's happening? Glad to have you with us today. How's your journey going? Hit any roadblocks? Making good progress? I hope so. We came across a couple of interesting pieces of information that we will be sharing with you, like exposure to heavy metals and how they're linked to dementia, and trace metals that mitigate dementia risk. And some information about dementia sufferers showing revival of memory and cognition through cell plasmalogen treatment. This is very interesting, and we'll be following it for a few episodes in the future. And we'll be talking with Amy Schenk from NRCP, and she has some great ideas for caregivers about making lists and asking for help and finding help. It's quiz time. What are the 2 rules we follow here at Gut Punched? Do you know them yet? Okay. 1, you have to take care of yourself, because if something happens to you, who is going to take care of your loved one? And number 2, you can't do it alone. You need help. Find a good caregivers group, network with friends and relatives. So let's get going. Here's a great article from the Epoch Times, written by George Citroner. It's called Exposure to Heavy Metals Link to Dementia Risk. Toxic metals like lead, cadmium, and manganese are widespread in our environment and are associated with impaired cognitive function and cognitive decline. As the prevalence of Alzheimer's disease and dementia continues to rise, a growing body of research is sounding the alarm on a possible culprit: heavy metal exposure. From the medications we take to the water we drink and potentially even the air we breathe, metals like lead, cadmium, and aluminum are widespread in our environment. These metals can increase the risk of cognitive decline and neurological conditions. Nearly 7 million Americans live with Alzheimer's disease, and this number is projected to almost double by 2050, according to the Alzheimer's Association. Cadmium, in particular, has been increasingly released into the environment through industrial activities such as coal mining and the use of phosphate fertilizers on crops. Aluminum, another metal linked to an increased risk of dementia, is being considered as part of a potential geoengineering method to mitigate climate change through the injection of aerosols into the lower stratosphere. This could lead to an increased risk of exposure to aluminum compounds for humans and ecosystems. The legalization of marijuana in a growing number of U.S. states may also exacerbate the problem of toxic metal exposure. A 2023 study found that the cannabis users had significantly higher levels of lead and cadmium in their blood and urine compared to non-users. Researchers discovered that the cadmium levels in cannabis users were, on average, 22% higher in blood and 18% higher in urine. Lead levels were also elevated by 27% in blood and 21% in urine among these users. And that's according to the Environmental Protection Agency. There is no safe level of lead exposure. Now, on the other side, trace metals that mitigate dementia risk. While some metals can adversely affect neurological health, many essential trace metals could potentially reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia. These trace metals, or minerals, play a crucial role in maintaining brain health and mitigating the risk of neurodegenerative diseases when not consumed in excess. For example, magnesium, neuroprotective, reduces oxidative stress and inflammation. Zinc, essential for immune functions and brain communication. Copper, reduces oxidative stress and inflammation. Selenium, improves cognition in mild cognitive impairment. Food sources rich in these trace metals include various nuts like almonds, walnuts, and pecans, and seeds like chia, flax, and sunflower. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas, and black beans. In whole grains, including whole oats, quinoa, and barley. While these trace metals may have a neuroprotective effect, they are not a substitute for established treatment for Alzheimer's disease and dementia. A comprehensive treatment plan that includes lifestyle changes, medications, and cognitive training is still necessary to manage these conditions effectively.
We'll be right back to Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
I was in charge of my mother since she retired from work. When she was diagnosed with Alzheimer, it just turned my life like upside down. It was difficult for me to identify because she normally forget where she left the keys or if she has something to do. She can have a conversation like normal with a neighbor, but suddenly she comes to me and she says, "Who's that? I don't know who's that." And she started like repeating the same questions. And when she was diagnosed, she said, "What are you telling me? No, I don't have this." Because she didn't want to recognize what was happening to her. 1 in 10 Americans over 65 has Alzheimer's disease, and 2/3 are women. For more information, go to brightfocus.org.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
The next article comes from Epic TV. I stumbled upon this earlier this week, and they have a section called Vital Signs. It actually came from a video called Remembering Yesterday, Judy's Recovery Story. Signs of recovery from Alzheimer's, dementia, and other neurological disorders are being shown by patients on plasmalogen and other targeted nutrient therapies. Plasmalogen is a phospholipid essential to the brain, lung, and heart function. These patients first had their biochemical imbalances pinpointed using neuroscientist Dr. Diane Goodnow's diagnostic technology. They were then given plasmalogen and other nutrient treatments based on their needs. Dr. Goodnow identifies low plasmalogen as the prime cause of Alzheimer's disease, as well as a leading cause of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, also known as ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, autism, and other neurological disorders. We can restore the biochemical function. We can begin the health recovery phase. But to really, truly complete the recovery, you need to be rehabilitated. On Vital Signs with Brendan Fallon, Dr. Goodnow and his team explain how they are rehabilitating people recovering from dementia and other major health crises back to life. A lady in her 60s, Judy Lemon, arrived at the Dr. Goodnow Lakeview Wellness Center in Saskatchewan in August 2023. She was suffering from severe memory and cognition loss caused by white matter disease. In the beginning, she struggled to even make herself a cup of coffee, says the Wellness Center CEO, Jana Horsnell. Where does Mrs. Lemon's health stand after ongoing plasmalogen treatment and several months of rehabilitation at the Wellness Center? Well, the next phase is, what are you going to do with your new brain? You have to have a purpose in life. You have to find a way to get back into the world, says Dr. Goodnow. And you can find out more about Dr. Diane Goodnow's work at www.drgoodnow, that's GOODENOWE, drgoodnow.com.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Repeat after me. Apple, table, penny.
Apple, red.
When you tell people he has Alzheimer's, but he's in a clinical study, it's
not so hopeless.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, it's like, I hope we can just hang in there and maybe they'll find something, you know.
Ask me again.
What season is it?
It's when all the leaves down and
I know it's there, but I can't get it.
Yeah.
And it just kills me.
I remember watching Dad interact with the kids and thinking, geez, in 5, 6 years, will he even know who they are? 1 in 10 Americans over 65 has Alzheimer's disease. Learn more today at brightfocus.org.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
My guest this week is Amy Schenk. She is the Community Outreach Lead for Neuropsychiatric Research Center of Southwest Florida. In her role at NRCP, she does education, outreach, works with physicians, works with caregivers, participates in healthcare, and is the go-to for all topics Alzheimer's and dementia for all types of media, radio, print, podcasts, and more. Plus, she writes a monthly article for the Health and Wellness publication in Lee County. Now, we talked with Amy way back in episode 4. Her knowledge about the illness and caregiving is extensive. She has some great ideas to share today about how to find help. You won't want to miss this. I am speaking with Amy Schenk. And Amy Schenk has been very helpful to Gut Punched. We spoke, a couple weeks back, it was maybe 8 weeks ago. She was one of our guests, one of our first guests, and she's got so much information. We decided, let's get together again and talk about when to get help in the home and what to look for in a caregiver. Now, Amy is an expert. She knows a lot. Hi, Amy. How are you doing?
Jeff, I'm doing great. And thank you so much for having me back again. And I will try and live up to your kind compliment of being an expert. I will do my best.
Well, you've got a lot of experience. You've been doing this for a very long time, and you've been extremely helpful.
Well, again, I'm happy to share what I know, because one of the things that I am very aware of, and having been doing this for a while, is that it can be very isolating and very lonely for caregivers. And if you don't know where to look for resources, it can be overwhelming. So taking advantage of those resources and learning a little bit more, if that can ease the burden a bit, I'm all for it.
Good. So when does a caregiver know, or do they know? Do they need somebody to tell them, pay attention, you need help? Or is it just something that it comes and they go, okay, I can't do this alone. I need help. I'm going to ask for help. What did I look for?
And that is such an excellent question, Jeff. And I can say yes to both of the questions. So one of the things that I think all caregivers really kind of have in mind is they want to do their very best as long as they can to keep their loved one at home with them. There are a lot of reasons for that. And one of the things that I believe all caregivers underestimate is how amazingly challenging it can be to care for someone who has memory or cognitive problems. It's very, very difficult. What I find a lot is that people truly want to be able to care for their loved one. They may be overwhelmed. They may be exhausted. They may be concerned because their loved one doesn't want anybody else in their home. They may have pressures for other family members. All of those stressors can make it almost overwhelming for a caregiver just to even make a call. I think I just kind of look at things globally. Many of us have been brought up to believe that we don't need help. We can handle it, and we can handle it ourselves.
Right.
And this is one of those situations where that is a wonderful sentiment. And the truth is, I don't know anyone who's on this journey who couldn't benefit from a little help. A couple things come to mind. One of the things that many times people will say to me is, well, my friends have offered to help, or my kids say they can help, but I don't want to burden them. And here's a little tip. One of the things I recommend caregivers do is take a look of all of the things that are on their plate. And it's many times it's new things. Perhaps they've never managed car maintenance and repair, or maybe they haven't managed finances, or fill in the blank. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I recommend people do is just to take a little bit of time and just off the top of your head, make a list of all of the things that if you didn't have to do them yourself, things could be a little easier. Maybe it's picking up medications at the drugstore. Maybe it's going on a grocery run. I mean, there can be a million things. And I encourage people to come up with the list.
That's a great idea.
Because one of the things that caring people will do is to say, Jeff, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. Well, if you have your list there, you are able to say, you know what, Amy, if you could do this, if you could just grab some extra groceries the next time you're at the store, or maybe it's if you could go and pick up prescriptions on your next run, that would be so helpful for me. I mean, it can be a million things. Maybe it's you need somebody just to talk to you for 15 minutes and share some coffee. Or maybe you need someone to come over and spend a little time with your loved one. When people offer to help, let's assume that they have good intention and they want to help, but they don't know what to do. And many times we don't know what to tell them. So start thinking of all of those things. So that's one of the things that I really encourage people to do. Now, I've had people say to me, when I've done that, my sister said she wants to help, but she's not dependable and she just really doesn't help. Then I say, take her off the list of helpers. So you give them the gift of being able to help you. So that's one thing that I think everybody can do a little bit better job of.
One of the things, we always talk about on Gut Punched is ask for help because you can't do it alone. You can't do it by yourself. And I know people don't like to do that. I had somebody throw it back in my face. Well, who's helping you? Well, I must have missed that one. It's what it is, and sometimes you have to stretch yourself, and that's why I go to the Caregivers group meetings when I can, because that's what I learn and hear how somebody else did it. Because I go, well, I could do it myself. You can't. I know I can't, but because I'm juggling so many balls right now. You go, okay, and there's just another one. So yeah, always ask for help and take care of yourself too. You can't do it. If you can't take care of yourself and you get sick or something happens, then who takes care of your loved one? You can't do it. So.
And that's so important. And I think be proactive for when people do ask, how can I help? If you already have your list, and it can be anything. Maybe it's, I know a lot of times women may not have done some of those little things on the honey-do list, or just things that, again, aren't the end of the world. But if somebody could do those for you, it eases your load. So make a list. Every time you think of something, jot something down. Because I think if we take a few minutes, all of us, if we take a few minutes to say, if I didn't have these things on my plate, I'd be better able not only to care for my loved one, but also to have a little less worry and maybe a little more time where I can, catch my breath.
Right. One of the gentlemen that I interviewed early on, Les Berger was his name, he talked about that, where he would reach out and he made a habit of it, of asking for help. He got his whole family involved and everybody had to agree to do what they were going to do. The one thing that stuck was that he had a couple of friends, and one in particular, that they would spend time together, even if it was 30 minutes a week, to go someplace and just get away. Had, a family member take care of his wife, that it made a huge difference. Until you do it, you don't understand it, but you need to do it.
And that can be one of the things on the list.
Yep.
I love that idea. Half an hour together, or again, maybe having a coffee date over the phone, or taking a walk around the block. Whatever it is, there's nothing that is too small to put on that list. It's, you know what? If you could have help with anything, what would it be? You could just wave your magic wand. And having those things in place, if that can ease the load a little bit, yes, it makes the caregiving journey a bit easier.
Yeah. Timeline. What would be a good indicator of somebody to say, I need some help. I need somebody to come into the house to help clean or sit? Because everybody's different in their journey. But is there a couple of indicators you could look for?
Well, here's a couple things I always look for, and I put it under the umbrella of safety. And we can look at safety as safety for the person who is living with the disease. You want to make sure that they have supervision around the stove, supervision in terms of don't want them to leave the house. We don't want them to fall. Many times people need a lot of that supervision. So that's a safety issue. But I like to look at the safety issue from the caregiver perspective. By the time you feel like you need help, my gut tells me you probably could have used help maybe 6 months before. And one of the particular challenges can be, and I hear this a lot, is, I know I need help, but my wife, my husband, my mom doesn't want a stranger in the house. And I can appreciate that that's difficult. So one of the ways to kind of help introduce someone to be a companion, to be a helper, and you kind of alluded to it, Jeff, is to say, you know what? I really want to be able to spend more time with you. I need somebody to help me with the laundry, the cleaning, all of those things. Again, it's not that you need it because your loved one can't do it. You need it so you can focus more on them. And many times the individuals, particularly when you're working with a home care company, some of these scenarios aren't new, but it can be a way to kind of introduce someone who ultimately may also provide some assistance and care for your loved one. None of us, if I said to you, well, Jeff, I need to get somebody in here to help take care of you, you're probably going to have a very strong reaction to that.
Right.
None of us want to feel that we need someone else to care for us. It's just not one of those things that people say, oh, great. But by focusing on having someone come to help me, I need them to help me and do this. Then again, the person who's living with the disease, it can be a little bit more acceptable that way. And one of the best things to do, best things to do is when you're talking to home care agencies, kind of get a little sense of, give them that scenario. How would we handle a situation? My wife doesn't want anyone in here. How are we going to make this work? I'm a big believer that it's helpful to interview more than one agency. And it's not that one agency is necessarily better than another. They all do a good job. You want to be able to feel comfortable with whatever agency you're working with. You want to interview them. You want to think about all of the questions that you may have and maybe what your needs are. And I treat it just like a job interview. And think about this, Jeff. I'm sure you've had this experience when you've kind of gone in an interview and you felt like, wow, this is a good fit. And others where, for whatever reason, I just don't feel that connection.
Right.
That's okay. We're all different people. That's very important as well. Making sure you've done a little due diligence in terms of looking at what's available. And this is the tough part, but doing that maybe before you even need the help, or you think you need the help. I always think you need the help before many times people do.
And you're probably right.
I always look at that as that's plan B. And this is the scenario that I think of a lot because it does happen.
Right.
You can be the most diligent, wonderful caregiver, and so many caregivers are. But what happens, and you had mentioned this, so what would happen if, heaven forbid, you tripped at home, you fell, hit your head? Could your loved one call 911? Many times that answer is no. So thinking about, heaven forbid, and I don't wish that on any caregiver, stuff happens or elective surgeries happen. You want to know what potentially backup plan you can put in place in case you need it. And you want to have it before you need it.
I have spoken to a couple caregiver companies. One we interviewed way back, and I just talked to one a couple of weeks back, and I was able to get a feel for how they approach things. Granted, an individual that they send out, both of them have people that specialize in caregiving for Alzheimer's patients. That's their field of expertise. Again, get a feel for the personality and to see whether there's a connection, because you're right. If you get somebody in here to take care of your loved one and they're nasty like a drill sergeant or something like that, that's not going to work.
Well, Jeff, to your point, the person, your first contact is important too, because you have to be able to have that, develop that relationship. Because here's what I tell people: things are going to go wrong. People make mistakes. We're human. So it's not so much about the fact that, oh, we're going to prevent, everything's going to be perfect. Wouldn't that be great? But we know that's not true. It's what could go wrong and how has the agency handled that before? Things like caregivers get sick, caregivers move on. What's the plan to make sure that the relationship I have with the agency and that caregiver, how are we going to keep that going? And what do they do if there's a situation that, heaven forbid, the caregiver is a drill sergeant and that's not a good match? Right. So putting those what ifs out there and listening to how the agency has handled that in the past is important. That if they say it's never happened, we've always had perfect matches, you know what? I don't buy it. It'd be wonderful, but it's not reality. So if your first contact, you're uncomfortable and feeling like this isn't going to be a match, what I find is it doesn't usually get better.
When somebody needs help, and if they can't get family to do it, obviously that's the best thing. And we know that, as we mentioned before, sometimes a family member says yes, but they really can't be reliable. Sometimes it's a friend or a neighbor, depending on your neighbors and where you live. But how would one go about references that they can check?
Well, that's, you know what, excellent question too, because if you just start Googling online, oh my gosh, you'll come up with 100 different agencies. I think sometimes it can be word of mouth. So maybe asking at your faith community, has anybody used home care services? So that can be beneficial. I know that the Alzheimer's Association, when you contact the 800 number, they may give you several different options. I know that I am confident that the Dubin Center, which is also here, Dubin Center and Alzheimer's Support Network, would probably give you some recommendations. The challenge can be, I wish it were different. The perfect caregiver for you, Jeff, may not be the perfect caregiver for me. So again, I think learning more, I'm very passionate about agencies that do employ their own staff because typically they have been reference checked, they're licensed. Those things are very important. And so knowing that can also help.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, you've been, once again, very spot on with the information that you've been giving us today and very helpful. I always take notes because I have to. I'm still learning. And I'm going to go back, and when we edit this thing, I'll have like 10 more questions for next time, but that's okay. I do appreciate your time and your patience, especially. We have for some reason, you and I have problems connecting via telephone and my equipment. Nobody else. You. I don't know why that is.
Because we're special. I'll just say it's because we're special and it's happened and at least we can laugh about it because we know it will probably happen. Yeah. And so maybe the time that it doesn't happen, we won't know what to do.
Probably so.
I'm more than happy to come back and maybe the miracle will happen. It will have no technical issues. Yep. I mean, let's go for that. We'll dream that we'll get there. But I greatly appreciate you having me as part of this and, anything that anybody can take from it. And if they find that that's valuable, I mean, that's very rewarding to me. So I appreciate being part of the podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
This is Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers.
Are you the caregiver for someone living with dementia? You're not alone.
I was a caregiver for my wife for 10 years, and it was a lot of work.
I'm a caretaker for my wife who has Alzheimer's.
I'm a caregiver of my husband that has CTE, and it's incredibly challenging.
The Dubin Center in Fort Myers has been offering free educational classes and support since 1995.
The Dubin Center has helped me exponentially with so many questions answered. It's just been great.
Well, that will about do it for this episode. We'd like to once again thank Amy Schenk from NPRC, Neuropsychiatric Research Center of Southwest Florida, for her time and knowledge. If you're a caregiver, you might want to start making your list. Keep it handy and make changes as you need to. This is another episode you might want to keep handy for future reference. We have some more interviews on the way in the next couple of episodes with some very interesting people with amazing stories about their journeys. We hope that if you know someone who has a family member or friends who are dealing with a loved one who has Alzheimer's or any type of dementia, that you would let them know about this podcast. For more information, you can check out the Alzheimer's Support Network at https://alzsupport.org alz.org/aboutus or the Dubin Center at thedubincenter.com. And to find your local chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, you can visit alz.org/local resources/find your local chapter. Now, if you have questions or thoughts about Gut Punched, Alzheimer's, and Caregivers, or if there is a specific topic you would like to know more about, reach out to us. The website is gutpunched.com, and the email address is gutpunchedac@outlook.com. A special shout out to Rick Peterson, Ora Santana, Gentry Thomas, Dan Moser, the Dubin Center, and my wife for their tremendous help and support making this podcast possible. Thanks for joining us, and please come back again for more. God bless.
This has been Gut Punched, Alzheimer's and Caregivers, with your host, Jeff Edwards. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to us on all the platforms like Spotify, Apple, Pandora, and more. If you have a question or want to get in touch, our email is gutpunchedac@outlook.com.